right, so according to Elaine, we are live. Um, so welcome everyone to this fantastic conversation. You probably caught some of the shenanigans going on with everyone getting a chance to see each other and connect. And I, for one, cannot tell you how excited I am to be in the company of these wonderful human beings, but also my senior mentors, people who I have looked up to and have just guided me in so many ways, no matter they knew it or not. And so we have a very short period of time, so I don't want to take up too much of it with all the wanting to sit at your feet myself and just listen. So I am going to try to get us started. The main thing that I said to all of the participants who are here on this call this evening, here in this remote setting, was that I wanted them to share with all of us some of the things that they remember about the way the ABA got started, the leadership positions that they were in, and the ways in which they see us, or maybe want to see us continue to have an impact as ABA and on the discipline of anthropology itself. I want to begin just briefly by saying we were limited in scope by moving to the virtual format. The executive board actually planned for there to be 3 sessions that would address ABA at 50 and have speakers from various parts of the founding and leadership of the organization over time. And we had to limit that scope because of the virtual format. But we will continue these conversations. As we said in the business meeting earlier today, we want to make sure we continue these conversations. And we see this evening's events, both this session and the celebration following, as the start of a year-long celebration in honor of the Association of Black Anthropologists. So I am not going to take up any more time. I'm going to ask each of our presenters to just briefly introduce themselves. And what I envision for this format is that we have a bit of a conversation. So while you're introducing yourselves, please tell us what role you played in the start of ABA, or the leadership you played in the start of ABA. And I have to give, I don't want to say props, I want to say honor to Ira Harrison, who left us, I want to say quite suddenly earlier this year, because he was supposed to be here. He was one of the first elders that I contacted to be a part of the in-person sessions, and contacted him by email, and he said, yes, I'm with you. Just tell me what you need me to do. And that was the last communication I had with him. So I just want to say that this event is in his memory. As Tony said, Dr. Whitehead said in his commentary in Transforming Anthropology, the current issue, he was Mr. ABA. And I just want to say he is missed. So if each of you could, and I want to say part of the reason why all of the people who are here is because I used his very informative, important article to frame the way that I would invite elders into this conversation. And I am aware that there are elders who are very active in the organization who are not in this conversation. And I did that intentionally. I wanted to make sure that we got some of the folks who we don't often see in this conversation. And so, like I said, we will continue these conversations. And like I said, there were supposed to be 2 other sessions that would have included some of the major players that we all know and love who are not here on this call. So don't fret, you will see more of the leadership and hear from them, but these are the elders that we wanted to capture first. So without any more ado, I'm Rashay Barnes. I'm president of the Association of Black Anthropologists, and I'm going to open the floor now. I'm going to turn to my mentor, Dr. Johnnetta Cole, to just start with introduction. No need to give a lot of additional information. I'll come back to you all with the starter questions after you introduce yourselves.
I think I am live. I proudly introduce myself as Johnnetta B. Cole, the Spelman sister of Rashay Daniels Barnes, and yes, her mentor. Thank you. There's an African proverb that says it does no harm to be grateful. We're all grateful to you, Sister President Rashay, for organizing us. I am clearly one of the elders. If we want to get specific and start talking about dates of birth, I claim being that elder. But you know, there's another African proverb I like. It says, the young go fast, but the elders know the way. And I think that combination of intergenerationality is part of the great vitality of our organization. Let me just round up my comments by saying, yes, I was there. How well I remember Anselm Remy, how well I remember Council Taylor, Ira Harrison, those 3 brothers who I'd like to think are somewhere up in glory, saying, y'all better carry on because some of the stuff that led us to organize the ABA still ain't right. And I pass it on.
Thank you, Dr. Cole. Can I ask Dr. Johnson to introduce yourself now?
Thank you very much. Rashay, thanks so much for organizing this. And I'm so delighted to see colleagues and friends that I haven't seen for a while. I'm Walton Johnson. I'm not sure what else you wanted to say. Oh, you might be interested to know that I'm talking to you now from Cape Town in South Africa, where it is 1 o'clock in the morning.
Oh,
so, so you can see I didn't want to miss this session. I also, I told my wife that this was a session in praise of the ancestors. So she said that I should get out my little animal skin. And I didn't think that was quite appropriate, but I am in Africa at the moment. Is this the time that you wanted me to say something about the beginning of the ABA?
Sorry, please do.
Okay, well, I have the honor of having been involved in the really early sessions. And what I remember most, and maybe this is what Johnnetta was referring to, was the tension, if not conflict, between the sort of progressive more what some people would describe, I wouldn't, but some people would describe as sort of a militant approach to scholarship focusing on action, On the one hand, that Anselm comes to mind when I think of that wing, and all the sort of more conservative, reserved wing. Elliot Skinner is a guy who sort of comes to mind when I think of that. And that was a tension that emerged very, very early. I didn't have such a leadership role, though I think I was one of the earlier editors of the ABA notes and so on. But the one other thing that I will say is, as regards the future and what I would like to say to people who are coming along, is to stress the importance of actually doing very, very good ethnography. I know it's a short time, so I'll be very brief. But I do a lot of work in South Africa, and I did at the time, and we were concerned about apartheid and fighting those at that time. And I remember going to a session, and we were arguing some point having to do with apartheid in South Africa. And one of the white scholars said, well, you know, what you say, you know, may or may not be true, but I was there, and this is what I saw, and this is what so-and-so told me. At that time, African Americans, Blacks, weren't allowed to do research in South Africa. So basically, he was telling me to shut up because I know I had he had that firsthand experience. So I learned right then that there's no substitute for good on the ground research and data gathering. You know, that's got to be the basis of a good sound argument. So thank you very much for organizing this, and I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to change the format just a little bit because I want to make sure we have enough time for our conversation. I'm going to, and while I have everyone, I'd like to have Elaine, if you're still on the call, please change Dr. Page's name from mine to Enoch Page. I put it in the message, but please do that for us. Enoch Page, so that the screen that shows up as Rashay Barnes, please enter Enoch Page. Thank you so much. So I want to have everyone introduce yourselves quickly, so then we can go into the conversation and talk. I really want you all to get into more of a conversational mode, if I can be so bold. I want to throw out some questions and then have you engage. The other thing I want to do is to let everyone know that I put in the chat the reception and celebration that is happening immediately after this event. What we hope we'll be able to do is allow for a continuation of perhaps question and answers once we get to that setting. And then we'll start our 50th celebration and reception, and we have some things planned for that. So, so bring your glass of wine or your hors d'oeuvres to that next session so we can continue our conversation and have our little party. Okay, so I'm going to ask Professor Bolles, Professor Walker, Professor Whitehead, Professor Moses, Professor Blakey, and Professor Page to quickly introduce yourselves, maybe tell us a little bit about the beginnings of your time in ABA, like what were your initial roles, like whether it was ABA president or TA. Give us a little bit of that background, and then we can go into a fuller, hopefully, conversation.
Okay, so let's see, I guess I'm up. I'm Lynn Bolles. My first meeting, ABA meeting, was as a graduate student. And it was at my first AAA meeting. So that was, I was brought around with Vera Green. who was one of my mentors. And so this is where I got to meet people. And there were so few of us that we used to meet in somebody's hotel room, and we could hardly fit on the 2 twin beds. So,
Yeah.
so that was that. And I guess my second meeting, I think, was where I met Yolanda at the Wellesley Conference on Women, and I think she had just come back from the field. So that was my second kind of encounter, except outside of the Rutgers a crew where I was there for what was it, 4 years, 3 years, whatever it was. So that was 1976.
Hi, everybody. Yolanda Moses. My first anthropology meeting was 1972. And it was as a grad student. It was when Ira Harrison had gotten a grant from Winter-Grin to invite Black anthropology graduate students to the AAA. Because I didn't know about the AAA. I didn't know there was a professional organization. I was at the University of California, Riverside. And that's where I met him, of course. I think I met Faye, I'm not sure, but definitely Ira, Michael, Tony, Sheila, and I remember the communication was through a newsletter called Notes from the Natives. I remember that. And Jerry, what's Jerry's name?
Right, Jerry Wright.
I remember how we would all, just like Lynn said, get together in a conclave. And at that time when all of us got together in the hallway, people were looking. They were stopping and looking to see what these folks were doing. And I just remember how important it was, because it was that group that kept me in anthropology, because I was not sure this was something I wanted to do. And as you know, I went on to be a part of it. So I'm happy to be here today.
Next.
Michael, Tony.
Oh, me? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm going to introduce myself as quickly as I can by way of lineage in terms of, I went to my first AAA meeting the second year of my graduate days in 1969. And I was about to either quit or be kicked out, because that's a whole nother story. But to go there, that was a year before the ABA was formally established. And to see all of the energy of these Black folk, Sheila, I don't remember whether Johnnetta was there, but to see all those people there just really is a major contributor to my being an anthropologist. And Ira became a mentor. Anselm was a mentor, because these Black folk, they gave you their time. I think some of my greatest times was to sit in at night having chats with Anselm, St. Clair Drake until 4 and 5 in the morning. And when I wrote the piece in tribute to Ira, one of the points that I made, Ira had pointed out that around the mid-'80s, the year that Vera Green died, there was a problem with people stepping up to the leadership of the association. We were really on very, it was very difficult at the time. And I was one of those people who never wanted to be the leader of anything. And I went to the ABA meeting in '82, and this senior sister, Johnnetta, she said, What about you, brother? You just sit over there. You come to these meetings and you sit on the corner. You don't say anything. It's your time, brother. Step up. You know, and I sort of like, wow. And as I said to Faye Harrison later, when she was asking me to do something, my mom taught me that when a strong woman, Black woman, tell you to do something, you do it. You don't ask questions. So I went to the meetings the next year, and I think Lynn had just had a baby. She was the president. I was president-elect, and there was no meeting. There was nothing. So I had a meeting in my room. That's when I met Faye, Harrison, Ira, and Willie Baber. They said, we'll work with you. And so then we began to lay out the strategy of how do we revitalize it. We came up with this very controversial proposal at the time that although we are small, we have to sort of push to become a unit of the AAA. And it was really tough. And we got them to do that. And then Ira took over for 2 years. He was great. And then Michael, after that, as president, and then Faye Harrison. And you could see the beginning of all of these component parts begin to take place. So that was my role, but as usual, I'm sort of a peripheral observer. I don't really get myself into the middle of being the leader of groups. But the ABA saved me, and I really point that out as a contributor to my career. Oh, can I say one other thing? Can I just say one other thing? One of the other things that Johnnetta said at that time, when she told me to get off the fence and do something, she said, and this is why I wanted to know if I could use your name. She said, when you look out at the executive board of the AAA today, these white women who are now dominating the executive board, they came to us Black women to get us engaged with helping them make their move. And so she said, we have to do that, and we need you, brother. You gotta step up. And so I think it was in the mid-90s, my wife talked me into being on the nominating committee of the AAA. And there I found that all of those people who smile in your face on the outside of these meetings, when they get inside, they load up those things with white women. So I said, well, I'm going to learn from this. And so I put forth some Black names. It took 3 years.
Mm.
And that, I think Yolanda was the first Black president of the AAA, but I had to put her name in nomination 3 times. The bullshit that went on and that continues to go on behind the closed doors in the decision making. It's like, who was it, the OJs or somebody said, they smile in your face.
Your face.
I just wanted to get that in.
Backstabbers. Thank you. And thank you, Tony.
Oh, well, no, I mean, it's an education.
Michael.
Oh.
You're on mute.
Okay. Hi, I'm Michael Blakey. I'm NEH professor of anthropology and Africana studies and American studies at the College of William and Mary, where I also direct the Institute for Historical Biology. My association with the ABA actually goes back near to the beginning, but in a very junior capacity. I was an undergraduate student at Howard University in the mid-1970s when it had reached its apex of anthropology in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. And there were 9 anthropologists. We've not seen that at a Black institution since, most of whom were Black. And Jerry Wright was the sort of leading ABA member there at that time. I was the one undergraduate TA, so I knew all of them well, and they were good mentors. And Anselm Remy was in town, and I was always, you know, I was the kid. I was always after them for what they knew. But we students, we had a little anthro club, and we read, I think it was not News from the Natives then, I think it was Notes from the ABA. We read that like it was a promise.
Mm-hmm.
So then when I went on to UMass Amherst, I had the great privilege of being mentored by Johnnetta Cole. And beyond the classroom, which was great, there was exposure to the Africana scholarship in the Africana world in Johnnetta kitchen. So I spent a lot of time in Johnetta's kitchen, just a little bit more than the kid. So began in the early 80s to go to the meetings and to meet everyone. So that by 1987 to 89, I became president of the ABA. We accomplished, I think, 3 things, 2 of which, and I'll be happy to talk more about them later, but it was important to me, on top of what Tony and Ira and Faye had done as secretary during that time, had done, Willie Baber, what we needed was a journal that would allow us to get institutional money, subscriptions, and to have a real organ. And so it was a little dicey at first. I'm going to tell this story and just then just leave the other thing hanging. So we got Arthur Spears. I invited and hired Arthur Spears without money, right? And and he was great. That's what we needed, the first step, an editor. And then I remember the meeting, I think it was the last meeting of my presidency. And we didn't have a name for it. I had a name, which I can't remember. Faye had a name that had praxis in it somewhere. And as I recall, both were somewhat inelegant. The general body began to discuss this. What would be the name? And as I'm standing at the podium, what I remember is hearing all of this, and something came to my mind that then reached my lips, and I said, what about transforming anthropology? And after some more discussion, I don't know if it was Annie Barnes or Leith Mullings, I don't know, it might have been you, Yolanda, couple people sitting near the aisle, moved it, seconded it, and it was done. The other thing was that we finished joining AAA, and that, and the wisdom of that may always remain a question, or for some time.
Mm.
Who's gonna jump in?
Sheila.
Don't be shy.
Sheila.
Okay. Well, first of all, I have to say something about Ansel Remy. According to the business meeting, he is not yet an ancestor, but is alive and well and living in Haiti. So,
Yeah,
very good.
I was wondering about that.
yeah. So, Riche, I want to say thank you for getting us together. I mean, most of us have not seen each other in huge amounts of time. And so it's wonderful to just see each other. My role was editor of the newsletter. The first newsletter typed on my typewriter.
Oh, look at it. There it is.
Yes, this is it. And it was called News from the Natives. We claimed that word because that's how we were treated by discipline. So we decided, okay, fine. So the natives will speak for ourselves. We will say what we want to say about ourselves, and we will use that as an empowerment. And one of the, of course, none of us had ever heard that there was an African-American intellectual tradition. And so in order to do this newsletter, I was a research assistant at the Divinity School at Harvard, and there were 3 African-American graduate students in anthropology: Jerome Wright, Carol Henderson Tyson, and Beverly Bruce. So I contacted them. We got together in my little dorm room and we created News from the Natives. And one of the rubrics that we thought was really important, and it appeared in the second issue, was with respect to our elders. The point being that we had elders. So we began to identify those people who had preceded us. The first elder we honored was W. Montague Cobb, because one of the things we really didn't imagine that there was an African-American physical anthropologist, as Cobb was. And the bioanthropological lab at Howard is named for, Michael knows this very well, was named for Cobb. I ceased to be, I don't remember my ins and outs, but I ceased to be the editor at some point, and then I became the editor. I don't know why, but I did. Then it had a new name. It was called Notes from the ABA, no more natives. So I became the new editor at volume 4 in 1978. The first ones were from 1973. And then we got a little cuter. Now we're still Notes from the ABA, but in 79, we got color.
The logo.
Yeah. So I have no idea, but now lockdown has been very good for me because I've gotten to go through my archaeological dig and my study and find all this stuff. So I found all of the copies of the newsletter that I have.
Wow.
Yeah, just
archive that.
Well, just today in the business meeting, it was said that the ABA papers are at the Moreland Spingarn collection at Howard. Do they have all of the newsletter? I have absolutely no idea, but I will find out once we can go out. Right? So Walton talked about the fact that there were factions. So there were the people who liked our calling ourselves natives, and obviously there were people who thought that was just too irreverent. When I went to my first AAA meeting, what I remember, I was all excited about going to an anthropological meeting. I remember seeing one Black person way over there, and a very noted anthropologist gave one of those plenary sessions. And what I remember that noted anthropologist saying was, we are going to have to watch what we write because the natives are learning how to read. And I thought, what kind of discipline did I get myself into? And I didn't know yet. Fortunately, I didn't know, or I would have signed up for this. But then I learned that Kathleen Goff had characterized anthropology as a child of imperialism and a handmaiden of colonialism. So by then I got it. And I went to the University of Chicago, and I had, I'm writing a memoir, which I can talk about it all. My advisor, I went to talk about my dissertation, and a man said, you really should be a singer or a dancer. You are too happy to be an anthropologist. And it went on from there. So finally I got out, and then I could do what I wanted to do. And I have been doing that ever since. And as a result of being an anthropologist, doing research in the global African diaspora, my own research and, coming to my own conclusions that are very different from those people tried to teach me. My identity is that I am a citizen of the global African diaspora with a US passport as a result of a slave ship. Anthropology has been fine, my way, not theirs.
Enoch, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Enoch.
Hey, what's up, Tony? How you doing, man?
Still here.
I'm very happy to be here. I'm very honored to be here among the people who I consider to be the luminaries of the field, because I'm your junior. I'm 69, so I know how old you are. All of you, each one of you played a major role in making me into an anthropologist, and I am very grateful to you, and I pray for you whenever I do that. So thank you for everything that you did. I came into the ABA when Michael had become president, and I was still at the University of Missouri in St. Louis, and he called me up because I had attended one meeting, and so he had my name and number, and he says, we need somebody to help with the program chair. And I wasn't the program chair, I was just assisting the program chair to become the program chair the next year. So that's how I got started. Before that, before he called, I had attended a meeting, and that was the first time that I ever knew that there were Black anthropologists who were organized. And I was just tickled pink, to use a poor euphemism. I was excited. I didn't, it was the first time that I thought that I would be able to have other people to talk to about what I wanted to discuss, having discovered that my white colleagues were in another world and weren't interested in anything I had to say, essentially. The tension between working in a white department and having a relationship with the ABA was interesting, just because of that dynamic. In the ABA, the topics of interest we all shared. We worked together collegially. It was just a sense of camaraderie that I just couldn't understand why that couldn't happen in the department. And it took me some years to really get it, what I was up against by working in such departments. If it were not for the ABA, I'm certain that I would not have survived in anthropology as long as I did. When I had served as program chair for a couple of years, then I became the president of the ABA for the first time, and that was a glorious year for me. It was a high point for the ABA too, because just the year before we had decided as a unit to join the whole AAA and become a section of the AAA. And so it was the first year that the section assemblies were operating, and I was had a seat on the section assembly as the president of the ABA. And I always took the person with me who was going to be next. So the vice president would attend that with me so that they would be coached and learn how to do this kind of work for the ABA. I really enjoyed it. It was difficult in a lot of ways, but I think that we did accomplish some great things. By that time, Transforming Anthropology was becoming a journal, a formal journal of the AAA. It took another year or two before it reached that status. And one of the things that I did to help achieve that was to bring in Brackett Williams as the editor. That really did lift the journal to another level, and it also created some problems for me. But nevertheless, I think that we benefited from that move, and I was very happy to be serving in that capacity. I had a second term I did not plan to have and did not want to have. During that time, I had worked my butt off, just like Michael Blakey had, when he brought me in to try to find somebody to nominate themselves for president, and nobody stepped forward. The only person who stepped forward was Arthur Spears. And at the last minute, the very day that the materials were due, he told me he hurt his back, so he couldn't do it. And that's how I became second term president at a time when I had a grant and did not have the time to do the ABA. So that was not a good year. And in a lot of ways, it led to, a downturn in my career. But I did not want to leave the ABA without a leader at that critical time when we were just beginning to merge with the whole AAA. So it was a sacrifice. I knew what the cost might be to me, and I didn't mind doing it on behalf of the organization. So I'm glad we have benefited from every choice that each one of us has made. And I really think that our organization is growing and will continue to expand and make great strides in producing new knowledge on behalf of the Black world. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you all so much for introducing yourselves and sharing so much of that early history, so many things that we didn't know. We have had these accounts of the history, right? Ira Harrison's History, Faye has a commentary. in the current issue. Tony has a commentary. We've heard conversations at various meetings about things that have happened, but not the nuances, right? Not the stories as they were experienced. And so I just want to again say how thankful we are. I'm guessing that you all aren't looking at the chat, but many people have said in the chat how appreciative they are of this session, and of learning so many things about the sacrifices you all made in so many different ways, getting all of this started. One thing that I did note was how many of you were voluntold, as we have come to frame it. It's when you're told that you are going to be volunteering for something.
Yeah.
We have continued that tradition, let me tell you. That is something we continue to do in ABA. So you'll be happy to know that most of us have fallen into ABA in a similar way. There are a lot of things that you all talked about that I think we continue to struggle with. There are leadership struggles, as Tony was mentioning. There are departmental struggles, as Enoch was mentioning. And I hope it's okay that I'm using, I shouldn't use names, nope. As Dr. Whitehead was mentioning, there are department issues, as Dr. Page was mentioning, and just, so many things. The transforming anthropology, we're still negotiating some things about that. We're still having conversations.
Ooh, uh-oh.
Or you
She
became
agreed?
muted.
And if we should continue, not if we should continue, but just some of the challenges with being in this AAA structure, right? And so I wanted to maybe as the last question before we go into the next session, where we'll continue to have question and answer, and also people be able to ask you questions directly in the next session. What are some of the things you would suggest for us as the ABA at this point, as we're moving forward, particularly in this climate that we find ourselves in, that's not going to go away anytime soon? Even with the change, hopefully, in leadership. Some of the conversations we have been having have to do with the impact of COVID-19 on who's going to be able to continue in the academy, what resources are going to be available to us. And so I just wanted to throw that question out there. And you can jump in as you see fit, but it's basically a question of, given that we're still challenged by many of the things that you were challenged by. Not to say that things haven't gotten better, of course they have, but what are some of the things that you would say to us as we move forward?
I guess, oh, Tony, did you, or you coughing? What?
Yeah. No, I was going to just say quickly, because I'm really into a thing, and I think we've been forced to do that all the time. But I've always been not a purist in terms of the canons of anthropology, and I always feel fortunate that I got training and work also in public health. I was always afraid of putting all of my eggs in one basket, and actually public health offered me more opportunities to do anthropology than I got in anthropology. And so I wanted to suggest that try to develop, in training programs, some diversity of professional training, because they had a meeting in Puerto Rico some years ago, and the ABA folk went off to the university. And I remember they're sitting there and listening to people talk about their difficulties in finding jobs, knowing that Black anthropologists weren't being hired, being on hiring committees in my own department, et cetera. And as I listened, I thought these departments are training our people, and it's almost like the miseducation of the Negro. You know, in other words, you are trained, and who you are and the skills that you have are devalued. And then you are sort of forced into learning a lot of bullshit. I mean, I'm not talking about all that, but you know, that you can't market, and you will talk about your stuff to your colleagues, and they will steal your stuff and go get a lot of money. And so I was known, you know, I had guys I was in school with, and I had a master's in public health, so I didn't spend too much time in anthropology. And this guy is always saying, Tony got a PhD from the University of Pittsburgh by taking those classes, you know, what do you call those? Special studies, independent studies. That's not true, but I didn't spend time, and I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to work anthropology for me. Mm-hmm. And that's my advice to others, you know, and hopefully don't let people just lock you into talking like they talk, thinking like they think, and all the rest of that, because for many of them, we are still objects of study. You know, I'm finished. Yeah. I'm sorry.
No.
I know we are very close to the time when we have to wrap up, but here's something that's really in my heart to say. This is a moment of intense trouble, divisiveness in our country. For those of us who feel comfortable calling this our country. And it takes something to say that when you've never been as a people fully embraced. But this is a moment when it does seem to me that we as anthropologists could make an enormous contribution if we could find a way to use language which others could understand about this pandemic. And I'm not talking about the one that is centered in COVID-19. I'm not talking about the one that is the economic consequences from that health crisis. I'm talking about the pandemic of systemic racism. Mm-hmm. And while there are among us, and I'm looking at my extraordinary and truly beloved student friend, Michael Blakey, who grapple with this constantly, I still want to suggest, mentee, sister friend, Spellman, sister Richey, that if we could find a way to really explain race and systemic racism, it would be an enormous contribution to where we are.
I think part of, and we get kind of not caught up, well, how in fact, who gets to say, again, who is allowed to speak on behalf of? And that has become even more pronounced as that group has become even more narrow. So I think of the latest text on caste, that, I can't take it from the sister. She's really doing a bang up job. They love this book. We know that Oliver Cox in the 1930s said that is not applicable to our experience. But she has found caste, and they think it is ingenious, new, and so forth. So I think we get deterred by the latest flavor of what makes systemic racism more palatable, because we're giving it another name. And I think that has done the kind of intellectual work, as well as undermines, any kind of policy or any other objective that we want to mold and to dismantle what we know are some of the very important structural impediments that we all face. And yeah, it's for me, this is my latest bit. Because I was just absolutely appalled where, reading book reviews by people who really don't know social science, writing about somebody who doesn't know social science, who doesn't know the history of Black intellectual thought, who probably never heard of Alex Cox, or some of the and what that means. So, but that's my, we all have our own little crosses to bear, as it were. But that's my latest one. That kind of again, we're living in such incredible times, and then we get all this, as Tony said, the miseducation one more time. Yeah, so that's that.
I'd like to add something too. I appreciate what both of you just said, all three of you. Having been sliced and diced by academic bullying in my UMass department, I want to say that I don't think that we are going to progress as fast as we could if we keep protecting white scholars who we see as the nicest ones. I've had people yell at me at my department. I've had people run to my door where I live, begging me not to report them when they're treating me in a very negative way. They did a public event at which they handed out awards to a bunch of people and said laudatory things about them. And they called me up to receive a piece of paper that said honorary white male. And these are the nice guys who are behaving like this.
Yeah.
All right. And it went on from there, because the worst thing that happened is that when I was in charge of a hiring committee, I managed to get the person hired who they wanted, but I also managed to sneak in another hire for a person of color that they didn't expect. And the whole department would have been very embarrassed if they had said no to the person, because they met all of the criteria. And he was a former student from our department. And so everybody voted on it, and they voted to hire this guy. The very next day, the department chair tells me, we're going to have to rescind that vote. And I said, well, why is that? Why do we have to rescind the vote? And he said, because this person who works at the next school, who does this dentition training for us, he doesn't want to work with that person because he didn't like the support that he gave his wife when he was having a divorce. And I said, well, what does that have to do with our profession? That's personal issue. That shouldn't even be discussed in this kind of context. If that was all it was, it just would have blown over, but it went much further than that. It went so far that the pressure to bear from the discipline was brought down on me. I had 5 or 6 people in the discipline outside of the university, but across the country, supporting the white guys in my department to shut me up when I challenged this white professor who tried to stop the hire of a man of color just because he was a friend of his wife who supported her when she was going through a divorce. And that person who did that became the president of the AAA that year. Okay, and he's known as an anti-racist white person. All right.
We
So
need to out him.
I need us to recognize that I suffered. My career was ruined because of that. And I'm okay, I survived it. But that's not the point. It should have never happened. And I begged people to support me and help me, and nobody would step up. So maybe they just did it because, you know, I'm known as basket mouth and I talk too much. Or maybe they just did it because somebody said to me, well, Enoch, why do you have to be so radical? Or maybe they just did it because they didn't want to alienate their personal relationship with people in my department. All I'm saying that it was criminal and it should have been called out. And had the noble people of the ABA said something to these people about their behavior, they would have stopped it. But they didn't, and they didn't have to. And that left them available to do it to other people after I left. So I'm just saying that that's not progress. That's actually quite reactionary behavior coming from very liberal, so-called progressive white people. And we let it happen. So I would like to see us change that behavior. Thank you.
Is there another minute or not?
So what we're going to do, Dr. Blakey, is move to the hallway. So you know how we used to go out into the hallway when we ran out of time in our session because we were being kicked out of the room. So we're being kicked out of this room as per usual, and we'll go into the hallway.
That's exactly what we used to do.
We'll go into the hallway until our next session starts. Does it sound familiar?
Yeah.
And then we'll start our next session.
Michael, that was the link where you and I were.
The what?
The link where you
that's
and
where
I
we were.
I think.
So do we have to, can I follow up Enoch, or will I wait for something to happen electronically here? I wanted to follow up Professor Page on that.
Yes, so the link to the hallway is in the chat. So everyone should go into the chat. Tayo just posted the link that goes directly into the hallway. Tayo's is the last message before Dr. Goodman. So you'll see Tayo Jalasho, she's writing to me, says, Rashay, please post the Google Meets link. I will repost.
So do that now.
Yes.
Okay, it's a Google link.
It's a Google link.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna try it.
Wish me luck.
It again.
But I'm so non-techie, y'all don't see me. Y'all better come find me.
We'll come find you, Dr. Cole.
So it's Elaine, and if you go to the ROV page, you can find the hallway there. If for some reason you go down the wrong hallway.
I don't want to talk about
it.
Is that the 7:15 meeting for which you have sent us a Zoom link?
Yeah.
The Zoom link
it's in the chat.
The Zoom link will start at 7. It doesn't start until 7:30.
Oh.
We're gonna go into the hallway for a few minutes, and because I don't want to lose our momentum.
So when we do that, we leave this video, right? We're gonna leave this to go there.
Right. So click that link, and we'll see you there.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm there, and I see Enoch, but I see a bunch of other people.
Allow.
Yeah, everybody's in the hallway.
You have 2 screens. That's awesome.